Right, welcome to the Stellified podcast. Tonight I am joined by a man of many layers. He's someone who blends ancient traditions with modern clarity. Chris Nicolson is a shamanic practitioner, astrologer, sound therapist, Reiki teacher, crystal healer, musician, and an experienced speaker known for his dynamic and thought-provoking talks. But beyond these titles, Chris is a guide. Chris is someone who helps others navigate the unseen realms, the cycles of life, and the energetic traps that so many of us fall into on the spiritual path. In a time when spirituality has become commodified and diluted, Chris offers a refreshing mix of grounded wisdom, multidimensional insight, and no-nonsense honesty. And I've spoken to Chris and met Chris many times, so it's an honor to speak to you again. I think it's been probably about 2 years, I think, something like that, since we did a podcast together when I was working on the Drake Michigan project all that time ago. We had a really good chat about cognitive dissonance, especially in the truth circles at that time, which was such an important talk. And I believe you're still putting that word out there because it is an important chat. But we're going to delve very much into the spiritual realm, which is more intriguing for me, I'll be honest with you. But before we get going into that, Chris, I know you've walked a diverse and powerful path. I know your background, so you know, from astrology to sound therapy to shamanic work. But what got you started? If you can get started on some the listeners, the new listeners that you'll be teaching to tonight. What started you on this journey?
Well, thanks for having me, first of all, and it's a real privilege to be here, my friend. It's good to connect with you again. We have been friends for a few years now and met and chatted many times. It's always been intriguing conversations, and I really enjoyed the podcast the last time that we had a conversation. So my journey up to now, which has been a real blessing and an honour and an intriguing journey, really started as a child. I was raised in quite a strict religious group, which many would class as a cult, and being brought up in that a very devout family place, I didn't really fit in. I was excommunicated as a teenager, and I had these men in suits telling me that what they believed and what they were preaching was the truth. And so I went looking for real truth because I researched their religion, I looked at their faith, I tried to pick it apart. I found fault with it. I thought, well, if they're saying that's truth and other people say other things are truth, what's true without opinion? You know, and I classified that as ultimate truth. What's true regardless of what you think and what I think and what anybody else thinks. If we weren't here, what would still be true? That's like ultimate truth, and was very intrigued in that. To begin with, my search began in a very atheistic perspective. I was a bit of a Richard Dawkins fan and really had stepped away from a belief in any afterlife or any gods or deities or anything like that, because it was a kickback against my youth. However, I started having experiences in my 20s and really powerful experiences in my 30s that changed my perspective, not necessarily so much about deities, but more so about the nature of spirit, the nature of human life. I was very fortunate in my early 20s to meet a mentor who taught me many things, helped me to understand a variety of cultures and belief systems, different forms of spirituality, faith, all sorts of things, a wide, diverse range of subjects that he opened me up to. And then later on in life, I met another mentor. I've had two major mentors who've supported my journey and taught me many things. And in that experience, the second one, this lady who's just a beautiful mother figure really in my life, she opened up my eyes to what spirituality really is and the individual path to spirit, to understanding what spirit is, to understanding different layers of reality and how we interact with them. In that time period as well, I started having experiences that could only be described as shamanic in the modern sense of the word. I know that many say shamanism comes from Asia and we shouldn't, culturally appropriate their word, but actually, when people from the UK and Europe travelled to study these populations, and the anthropologists, and they realised, you're calling yourself a shaman. When they then went to other parts of the world and spoke to people who held the same path as a witch doctor or a wise woman or wise man, they said, oh, you're a shaman. We've used this term. We've taken this term from the first group of people that we interviewed, and we're now applying it to everybody. So shaman is now a worldwide word that's used to describe those who connect to other realms and work in particular ways, which differ from place to place. Here in the UK, we had the Druids that were almost completely destroyed. They went greatly underground. And I've spent a bit of time trying to find the threads of that path in the UK, and one of my mentors was part of that, one of those threads. So, wow. Yeah, magical lady. And she's taught me so much. So I was also approached probably some 18 years ago now at the top of Glastonbury Tor when I was doing some work by some people who said, have you heard of the mystery schools? We would like to invite you in. We can see that this is something that might be useful to you. And so I started to go along, participate. But the Western mystery schools are connected specifically to Christianity. They have a Christian base. And that just doesn't suit me. I'm not interested in Christianity. Each to their own, but because of my journey, it's not for me. So I took some of the early teachings from them. I took the book list that they sent you away with to go and do your research and start studying, because it was a very self-led process. And then I decided to leave. I spoke to the teacher and said, I don't think this is right for me. I don't think I'm right for you guys. It's time for me to go on my way. So I learned a lot from that. I got a huge, excellent list of books to try and discover and find PDFs or original copies of, and really started a course of personal research that has not ended. It has continued right up to this day. So, I've been studying and looking at spirituality and, various elements of it and other things for over 3 decades now. And I love to look for ultimate truth. I love to search for those real truths and then to share them with people. So that's been the journey.
What experiences in the 30s then kind of woke you up to this then? There must have been was there a particular one that was strong enough to say, okay, there's something different about this reality I'm in?
Yeah, there was actually. And for many people who've gone through this particular experience, they might not have seen it or felt it as a huge life-changing impact. But for me, there were so many other things happened at the same time. It was very relevant to the start of my journey. And that was getting attuned to Reiki. I was already doing energy work prior to that. And I went on a course. I was volunteering at a charity in Edinburgh in the early 2000s. And I was sent on a course to learn how to do auricular acupuncture for the charity. Yeah. And the guy who was running it said, have you heard of Reiki? I said, yeah, I have. He said, you should do that, because I can feel stuff coming off you. You should do that. Do you get hot hands at certain times? And does this happen? And does this happen? I said, yeah, it does. Why? He said, Reiki. Go and do Reiki. So I went looking for a Reiki teacher and found one in Glasgow. And it was in 2006 that I went through both Reiki 1 and Reiki 2 with the same person. And it was a profound experience for me. For a start, that weekend, I stopped eating red meat.
Okay.
I got my attunement for Reiki 1. I went home. My wife had cooked me a meal for me arriving home, which was a steak and all the trimmings, and I couldn't eat it.
Right. Okay.
I couldn't eat it. My body had declined to have this food. It wasn't a cognitive choice. It just happened.
Okay.
So I made something else to eat, and there was a smell coming off the meat. And she said, "I bought this from the butcher today. It's a beautiful piece of meat." You know, and she was a chef, so she knew how to cook. She knew food really well. But there was a smell coming off it. And in my 20s, I had spent a little bit of time working in a slaughterhouse, just variety of jobs. And there was a smell in those buildings.
Yeah.
And as I was sitting trying to eat this bit of steak, I realised the funny smell that I was getting from it was actually the smell of death from the slaughterhouse. So I knew I couldn't eat that steak. I stopped eating red meat for many, many years. And after dinner, we were going to have a cup of coffee. And I had my NATO standard, as many people do, and I couldn't drink the coffee. And to this day, I don't drink coffee. I can't have caffeine of a high content. So there was a physical reaction on that first weekend to getting attuned to Reiki. And then these weird experiences started happening. And I thought I was going a bit mad. I would tell those around me. I've got 2 daughters who were in their sort of between. So in 2006, my eldest daughter was 12. So from that point up to 2011, for a 5-year period, just things got crazier and crazier and crazier. And I was sharing stuff with my daughters, with their mum, with some of my other friends, and saying, "This is happening to me. Am I going mad? Am I making this up in my head? Are you seeing this as well?" I was seeing signs in places. I was travelling down the motorways, and messages were coming up that were really weird on the boards, you know, telling you if there was roadworks or whatever up ahead. And those people that I shared it with said, "Actually, that is really strange. I don't think you're going mad." And then I had one particular experience in 2011, in August of 2011. I went to Stonehenge and Avebury to visit an American friend of mine who travelled over, and I knew them online, and this was the first chance to meet them, and had the most strange experience at Stonehenge, and then another strange experience at Avebury. And at Avebury, where there's 2 stones called the Cove. So I don't know if you've ever been to Avebury. There's massive stone circle, a henge, and there's a little village inside it. It's so big. It's about half an hour north. It's about a half an hour north of Stonehenge.
Right. Okay.
And right in the middle, there's a road going through it as well. And right in the middle of the stone circle, there's a pub in the village. And as you come out of the pub and look across the car park, there's these 2 stones that are not lined up next to each other, but are sort of at an angle to each other as they're standing up. And they're called the Cove, C-O-V-E. And as I walked through the gap between the 2 stones of the Cove, it was like walking through this thick miasma. It was like the air was thicker, like you could feel it. There was a resistance, a pressure, and it was almost as if there was this solidity to the air that I could force my way through, and it was maybe about the width of the stone, so maybe about a foot tall, and I pushed my way through this. I had just done a Reiki treatment for my American friend at one of the stones, and then walked through this, and I thought, right, okay, I've been questioning, being doubting Thomas continually for all these years, but this culmination of experiences, I came home to Scotland, and decided I needed to go to my favourite sacred site, my spiritual home, which is about 20 miles outside Edinburgh. So I had been at Avebury and Stonehenge on the Wednesday and Thursday. I came back to Scotland and decided to go to my favourite sacred site, my spiritual home, on the Saturday morning. And just as I was leaving the house, I heard a voice. Now, this voice, we have our own internal monologue. This was not my voice. It was a different voice that I heard. And it clearly said, take the video camera. So I turned to my wife as I was leaving and said, where's the video camera? And I was going up there to meditate. And her reply has always stuck in my head. She said, why do you need a video camera? You're going to meditate. It's not exactly a spectator sport. So she's right. You're just sitting there cross-legged. So I took the video camera. And the sacred site is called Cairnpapel Hill. And I climbed up to the top of this mound that's there today, which is covering some ancient druids' graves. And I'm sat on top of the hill, and there's a stone circle that's around the mound at the bottom. And I was looking for somewhere to place the video camera. And I was asking a question that had cropped up and cropped up and cropped up since the day that I got attuned to Reiki. Because the lady who attuned me to Reiki told me, there was 3 of us on the class. She did past life regression. And when we got a shot, each of us on the treatment table with the other 2 learning hand positions. And at the end of each session, she would ask for feedback from everybody. And then she gave feedback. And each time she said, I saw you in a past life. This is what I saw. So I was the last one to go. And she said, I saw you in a past life, saw you in 2 past lives, and you must be an old soul. And I said, well, what does that mean? I've heard that before, but what does that mean? And she said, well, I saw you in 2 lifetimes that it could only be an old soul because neither of those lives were on this planet.
Interesting.
Very interesting. So I called bull immediately, thinking, nope, just don't believe it. Went home to my wife and said that night, this woman says I'm an alien, she's mental. And tried to prove it wrong. And if you if you really want to understand the subject and you want to know that what you believe in is correct, don't just try and prove it right and look at evidence that proves it's right, because that's confirmation bias. You've got to try and prove it wrong. And if you can try that and you fail, you're going to give yourself more understanding that it's right.
Yeah.
So that was 2006. From then until 2011, I was, amongst other things, trying to prove that this was all nonsense. So stuff happened at Stonehenge and at Avebury that was really powerful. I haven't really gone into the Stonehenge bit, but that's a massive segue to do that. Suffice to say, while I was there, mad stuff happened, and it was a bit wild. Yeah. I thought things were going nuts for me.
Okay.
And then the Saturday morning, I go up to the sacred site. This voice tells me to take the video camera. I take the video camera. I sit on top of this mound, and I'm looking to find a spot to place the camera, and I place it on one of the stones, arbitrarily picking a stone. It was about 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was facing north, so the sun was high in the sky behind me. And if I'd placed the camera right down on the stone at the bottom of the mound, I would have been silhouetted. There wasn't a reasonable stone to sit it on to my right, so I placed it on the stone to the left, set record, climb up to the top of the mound, and I sit and meditate, and I ask an important question, which is related to this off-planet history stuff. Like, is it really true? Is it all bullshit, or is this true? Yeah. So then, because the type of person I am, I understand that you can't just take, you have to give. You have to give back. And so I decided I was going to ask my question, and then I'm sitting there on the top of a hill, like the Beatles say, the fool on the hill. I'm like, what can I give? I know what I can give. I can give love. So I asked my question. I started asking it. I had a little bag next to me with crystals that I had bought at Avebury and Stonehenge and other crystals that I had. And I set them up around me in a little crystal grid. You see it at the start of the video. And because this is a high point in the local landscape, some hill walkers come up behind me. And you have to pay to go into the mound to visit these ancient graves. And there's a little hut, a little World War II nesting hut that the guy sits in that you buy tickets from. It's about 50 feet away. So these guys come up and they're talking away, and they decide they're going to buy a ticket and come back. And I realised I've got about 5 minutes before they return. So I'd already been connected to my grid, started meditating, getting myself into that space. In the video, the video's 10 minutes long, and about 4 minutes in, you can hear the mumblings of these two guys talking, and they go away to buy their ticket. And I'm like, right, I'm in the space, ask the question. I did. I saw, felt nothing. I just asked the question. And I went, right, okay, so now I need to send love. And I imagined like the layers of an onion, sending love to the hill, to the area, to the region, to the country, to the world, to the galaxy, the universe. This layer upon layer upon layer of love getting sent out. Finished doing that, then shut the video off, packed up my crystals, moved to another part of the site, meditated for about an hour, and had the most amazing experience of a meditation. It was like taking DMT. This meditation was so profound. But that hour-long experience, I never filmed. I only filmed the 10 minutes when I asked my question, sent love, didn't really feel anything.
Yeah.
So I went home, and I'm talking to my wife, and I said, had this great meditation. It was phenomenal. And she said, did you film it? I said, no, I didn't. No, I filmed 10 minutes and told her the story. So then I put it on my laptop, and I'm sitting watching it. So as you watch the video, you can see the clouds. It's a clear day, and there's a few little clouds, and they're streaming past right to left across the screen. And then you hear the guys mumbling and chatting, the two hill walkers. And the good thing about those guys coming is they time-stamped my experience.
Yeah.
I knew as soon as they had been that I was ready to ask my question. So they time-stamped that. So then I asked the question, and I'm watching the screen. My wife had the television on. She was a big television viewer. My ex-wife, I should say. And she's watching television. And I was getting distracted by the TV, which was, from my perspective, above the laptop in front of me. And she's over to my right. So I'm looking at the laptop, watching this non-spectator sport of someone meditating, and talking to my wife, looking at the TV screen, and then back to the laptop. And I could see each time I looked at the laptop that clouds were streaming across. And I was looking for faces in the clouds and looking for, shapes, those kind of things to see what I could see.
Yeah.
So she started speaking to me. I look over at her. I look back at the television. I look back at the screen, and there's a cloud above my head that I hadn't seen come across.
Okay.
So I thought, I'll skip back to see when this one comes across. I skipped back, and I'm watching, and I made this noise, which I've made many times as I've repeated this story. I went, oh, and she's like, what is it? I said, this really weird thing has happened. So now this video, by the way, Anne, it's on YouTube. You can go watch it.
Cool.
So right above my head, in an arbitrary position, because I had put the video camera on this rock just sheer happenstance, And I should have been there the day before, but things got in my way, and I should have been there that Saturday morning, but I had to look after my younger sister's children, my nephews. So I had a bit of an adventure in the quarry with them, taking the dogs out a walk. So I was delayed in getting to this point that I'd been striving to do, because I just knew I had to go meditate up there.
Yeah.
And above my head, at about the 7-minute mark, so those guys were like 4.5 minutes. So then I start asking my question just after the 7-minute mark, and there's not a cloud in the sky above my head, but then directly above my head, this cloud starts to form, and it's like it's in the distance, and it's sweeping forward, and becomes more and more clear, and it thickens up and thickens up, and by about 30 seconds, 7 minutes and 30 seconds into the video, this cloud it fully forms, and it is the exact shape of an angel.
Wow.
And then it starts to change, and it morphs, and it takes about 45 seconds. And I asked for an answer to about the answer, but then, as I said to you earlier, I have to give back. There's got to be balance. So that cloud starts to change and morph, and it takes about 45 minutes, and then there is a very clear love heart shape. It forms a love heart, and if you look at the bottom of the love heart, there's this tail, a bit like a kite's tail, and the tail reaches right to the top of my head. It's almost like a speech bubble. You know, if you were drawing a cartoon, you were drawing a thought or a speech bubble, but it's a perfect love heart shape.
Wow.
So I wrote an article that I posted on online many years ago called "The Atheist and the Angel," or alternately, "Pareidolia and the Serendipitous Cloud." So, which is a great title for an article.
It is. It is.
Pareidolia is seeing shapes and clouds. Serendipity, of course, you know, things all happen at the right moment.
Yeah.
So that really, and I was, that was 2011. So I was in my late 30s. 2006, when I got attuned, I was 33, and I got my Reiki 2 attunement on my 33rd birthday. So I was 32 leading into 33. Yeah. And then it was 6 years later, 39, that I had the angel cloud experience.
Right.
So if you want to look it up on YouTube,
send me the link.
Yeah, I'll send you the link. Yeah.
Send me the link. I'll put it in the show notes so people can watch it.
Okay. Yeah, very, very interesting. And there are some other faces in the clouds throughout the video, but from, if you watch it from about 7 minutes 15 and just look above my head, you'll see it. And I never noticed it at the time, but I, obviously wasn't supposed to.
No, exactly.
So that
you needed to take the video recording, though, didn't you? That was the thing. That you had to take a video.
Yeah. It was amazing, and still spine-tingling today. And, other people can say, oh, it's just that's how clouds form, and pareidolia, etc. And I'm fine with that. That's okay. It suits my journey. It was my experience. I know what I felt. It's been a profound experience ever since. That was like the culmination of 5 years of stuff that happened. Loads of things happened between 2006 and August 2011, and many things have happened since. But that was the start of it, mate.
I can imagine many things have happened since. So, I mean, I know I've had profound experiences. Interestingly, as well, when I had my Reiki treatment, I had a profound experience there. But that's for another conversation. But when you definitely open yourself up to this reality, if you allow yourself to I find to be the curious adventurer of this realm, if you like, you can explore it. I think if you are closed off and you want to stay in the 3D, as they probably would say, if you want to stay in your day-to-day 9 to 5, view, and then that's the way you want to live your reality, and then you die, then that's fine, and that'll be your reality.
Yeah.
But I think if you become curious, if you choose that then becomes your reality, and you will then start experiencing different things.
I like that phrase, curious adventurer. I like it.
Yeah, that's the way I've found myself, especially since starting this channel, more and more becoming a curious adventurer of this realm and understanding. This channel started with trying to understand why we are controlled, or why there are entities potentially involved, or, you know, and that still plays a big part in my journey. But the more I get into it and the more conversations I have, the more magic actually I see this place, and the more magic I see myself as well, which would probably lead into how you then went in your journey of becoming something of a shamanic practitioner, if you like. Like you say, I always thought that a shaman would have to be chosen. So do you feel you were chosen?
Yes, in a word. I don't really feel like I had a choice. And many of the experiences in the shamanic journey are horrendous. I believe that my childhood experiences, when I got excommunicated and kicked out of that high control group that I grew up in, which were actually torturous and were both physically and mentally abusive experiences that I went through, that were not short-lived. I went through a 2.5-year period as a teenager of complete isolation in a community, and it was torture. And I think that was like a foundation stone that was a necessary part of the journey that I've gone through. And there's been many other very, very difficult moments, both ones in the physical realm and in other realms, and under guidance and on my own, that have been really difficult. I don't see the shamanic path as an easy path, and it's not one that I would recommend, to be honest. No. It's a very difficult path, and it can be very lonely, isolated, misunderstood, and it can cause a lot of anxiety and stress and difficult moments. And there are some real battles, like horrendous battles, and I have gone through many of them. But in many circumstances, it's been to help people remove an entity. It's interesting what you said. Your starting point for the channel was to look at the control that we're under and other entities involved in that. And that's yes, I would say is the answer to that. And looking at entities, looking at the different types of entities, the non-physical realm or realms, looking at the non-physical realms that we can't see, that are out with our range, our general average range of perception. There are a myriad of beings of different types. In fact, the unseen realm is as varied as the animal kingdom. There are those who fly, those who swim, those who crawl, those who are quite happy to be seen or connected to humans, and those who will scurry away and always try and avoid us. And there'll be those who work in the daylight and those who work in the dark. And there are ones who have been in existence since the beginning of time, and there are some who are born, and there are others who are created, and there are some that we ourselves can create. So there's categories within the spirit realm, and we of course are spirits. Our soul is an eternal experience that has these chapters of life. Each lifetime is like a chapter within your great storybook that can be read in the Akashic records, and it's a fascinating set of experiences. And if that's all true, and of course, you know, I do always say when I'm talking to people, I could be wrong. This is just my experience. I've changed my mind before. I may change my mind again. I could be wrong. But I believe that we are eternal beings, that our soul does have these multiple lives, and that actually we choose our family, we choose our childhood experiences, we choose our astrological setup to give us our character traits. We choose all those foundations which we can then work from. What challenges do I want to give myself? What benefits do I want to give myself? What advantages do I want to give myself? What reason for being do I want to give myself? And will I recognize it? And then we go through each life, and we, these stumbling blocks that many people see as stumbling blocks are actually stepping stones if you look at them differently. And once you come to the end of your life and you go through that life review, you look back and go, either excellent, I'm glad I learned, I'm glad that I followed through on that experience, or you go, shit, I've done it again, I've avoided that one, I put that difficult lesson in there for myself and I've just pushed it away and avoided it. So next time I'm going to do the same, but I'll make it harder. So I do believe in reincarnation. I do believe that I actually do past life regression for people, and I've gone into past life regression for myself with my mentors and others many, many times, and have connected to past lives, including the ones that lady told me about. And I didn't necessarily do. Yeah. I did that for the first time properly in 2012. Or maybe it was 2011, around about the time of that video. I went to see a guy in Edinburgh, an English guy who's living in Scotland now, and he'd written a book on Atlantis, and a bunch of people in his circle who had been connected in Atlantis. And so he did past life regression with all of them, a group of, I think, 4 or 5 people, if I recall correctly. And he wrote a book based on the experiences that they all had. So I then went to visit him to get a regression. I said, look, I've just read your book. I may have an Atlantean life, but I don't want to go there because that would be coloured by having just read your book. I would actually like to go off planet. Can I go off planet? And he said, yeah, okay, we can do that. And so we went off planet, and I saw this other realm. I saw this different coloured sky, different coloured landscape, had different experiences, was in a life within a body that I didn't recognise. He had a list of questions. It's like, go to your home, go and see your bedroom, go and see your kitchen, go and, where did you live, that kind of thing. So he asked me to go into the kitchen, and I said, there is no kitchen. He said, why not? I says, well, we don't eat physical food. He said, well, how do you sustain yourself? I said, we absorb light. And I didn't understand. I've since researched this particular group of beings and read some stuff that other people have put together, some downloads from them, and found out that that's exactly true, that they have these chambers that they go into and they just like absorb light and it sustains them. And what's really interesting is I've never really been that bothered about food. I eat to live. I don't live to eat. And I often forget to eat. If I'm busy, focused on a task or really doing something, I'm just single-minded, wanting to do this thing. And I don't bother eating. And it was often many years frustrating for me because I would have to stop what I was doing, go and eat, and then go back into my task. And if it was certain things that I've been doing in the past, you don't necessarily get that creative flow straight away. So I actually developed a difficult relationship with food, which I've since overcome because I have chosen to live a life which you require food. So it's important that I do have a good relationship with it. It was really interesting to learn that there was an understanding from a past life as to why I didn't really care about food that much.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. So knowing with that past life like that and other past lives that I've gone into and looked at, I very much believe that our spirit is eternal. So we are spirits, and there are other types of spirits. As I mentioned, very, very wide and varied range of spirits that inhabit the unseen realm. And many of them started coming forward and communicating with me, sometimes directly, sometimes through other people. And I've worked with a few friends who would be classed as, witches or whatever you would like to describe them as, who would bring through a spirit, and I would deal with that spirit and help them. In many cases, when it was a spirit of a human who had passed, I would help them move on. So I got involved in a thing called soul release. And this is one of my mentors helped me with this. She does this, has done for many years. It's our understanding that when your spirit leaves the physical body, when you die, if you're in your prime, if there's an accident or you're in a battle or you're murdered or some event takes, whips you out of your life, that many of the spirits get stuck. They're not ready to move on. They don't even recognize that they've died. So this is why you can go to like a battlefield or graveyards, and it can be quite thick with the amount of spirits that are there. As the energy, the air is thick with them. It's really intense. So we started doing, and I was taught as part of my training how to do soul release, which is helping a spirit of a human that has got stuck to move on to the realms, to move on to the next space, to go to that in-between space so they can then go and have the next life again. And that has been a really, really rewarding experience. It's been a powerfully rewarding experience. At the same time, and I've never advertised this, so I've been invited to go and help just through word of mouth, and at the same time, also never advertising it, invited to go and clear houses, clear spaces of negative energies and entities that were having a difficult impact. I've gone to a few different places, mostly around the UK, where I've been called upon by an individual or a family to help clear a negative entity that was really affecting one or more members of the family. I remember being invited to go to up near you, actually, I was near Liverpool, and to go and help a family whose daughter, who's a hairdresser, didn't believe in spirituality, was very much in the regular world, but was being attacked by a vicious entity who was scratching her body. I've got photographs with scratches on her back that was done in daylight.
Wow.
It's an amazing story, that. And I went along to help the family. They got to know me through a friend of a friend, and I drove up there and did some work and helped to clear that entity out of the house. So that wasn't a dead human who got trapped there. That was another type of entity. So I made it my business over the years to learn what are these categories. It's like studying the animal kingdom. You've got to know what are the mammals, what are the fish, what are the insects, etc., etc. And what are the range of types of spirits, and how do you either work with them, help them move on if necessary, or get rid of them if necessary as well. So that was a fascinating, challenging, and really profound experience that I'm still involved in today. And actually, in the last 2 years, I've had probably more experiences than I had in the previous 10 years. It seems to have exponentially increased the amount of work that's needed to be done. There's a couple of stories that I would like to get into and talk in a little bit more depth that are really fascinating. But also there's a couple of elements that I've come to an understanding on that probably quite controversial, that some people won't agree with, and that's okay. I just feel it's really important to put that information out there and to put it across to people, because I believe it's very dangerous. I'm actually writing a book at the moment.
Okay.
it's a book about my interactions and connections with the spirit realm, breaking down some of those categories of spirit, giving some of my experiences, personal experiences that I've been involved in, and then giving an understanding of where I think some dangers, some really powerful dangers lie. I know we had a little chat beforehand, and we were talking about some people have suggested that the earth is a soul trap, and that we shouldn't really be trying to get reincarnated. I don't agree with that. I think that's a slight... There is some truth in it, but it's truth in a different sense. I see the soul trap as a different thing, and it's something that we can avoid.
Mm-hmm.
But to do that, we need to educate ourselves. We need to share this knowledge with other people, even if it's uncomfortable. And that's why, through conversations with many of my friends, it has been suggested now is the time to start speaking about this. Even if people don't like it, they don't need to listen. Not everybody has to agree. There's 8 billion of us here. We can all have different opinions. And in fact, if we all believed the same thing, conversation would be boring. So it's nice to have that variety, you know.
There's a couple of things that's come to my mind, if you don't mind. One of which is quite interesting, a bit of a synchronistic moment in a way, is that my wife received a text message 2 days ago asking if we knew anybody that could help clear an entity from their house. Very interesting. So I'll talk to her. But one of the questions that comes up a lot from the people that watch my channel when I have these kind of conversations, and like you mentioned before, about we choose our life path, if you like. So we choose the astrological chart, the blueprint, and the kind of life that we're going to leave for challenges. And a lot of questions that come up, and I still haven't been able to get a good answer to people. And you may have this, is why would someone, say, for example, in Palestine as a child, choose that where they suffer so badly, and then I mean, it's like what kind of lesson is that in a way? You know, what is that? I mean, I have no answer, and maybe you have one, but and if not, that's fine too. It's such a difficult thing to kind of understand. I find it difficult.
It's a great question. I do have a response for that, and it might not be right, but I do have a response. I have an understanding. It's mine, but I would preempt that by saying anybody who has a difficult life, like a child in Palestine, or someone who's born with a severe disability, or a major impairment or illness, or someone who suffers from abuse of some kind. And I'm speaking it as someone who was abused, not physically. There was mental torture, a bit of physical violence towards me, but I wasn't sexually abused or anything like that. But the mental torture can be even more powerful and longer lasting, as many psychologists have said.
Yeah.
But to come back to your point, it's my understanding that we have to experience all kinds of lifetimes, all kinds of experiences and understandings. In fact, one of my favourite little stories, it's a little short story. It's about 9 or 10 minute read. It's a story called The Egg. And the premise of the story is a guy dies and he meets God. He's talking to God and he's like, what is this place? Why am I here? Mm-hmm. This is the afterlife, God says. You've just spent 40 odd years in a human body and you had these experiences. You died in a car crash, you had a wife, you had 2 kids, you had these kind of things going on. Mm-hmm. And God tells him that he's going to be reincarnated as a little girl in China in like 640 AD, some such time. And he goes, whoa, what, you're sending me back in time? God says, no, time doesn't exist where I come from. It only exists in your universe.
Yeah.
And he says, what's interesting is that you'll end up interacting with yourself at some point. And he asks God, he's like, is that true? And he says, yeah, that's true. That is true. It happens all the time. And you don't even know it. And he's like, well, what's the point? And God says, well, I made this universe for you to grow. And he says, you mankind, you want us to grow? He says, no, you, just you. I made this universe for you. And he says, well, what about everyone else? Well, there is no one else in this universe. There's just you and me. He says, but all the people on the earth, all you, all incarnations of you. Once you've lived every human life there is to be lived and gained all those experiences, good and bad, you'll have grown enough to be born because you're one of my kind. You're like me. You're my child. He goes, whoa, I'm a god? He says, no. You're a fetus. You've got all those lifetimes to live, all those lessons to learn. Every time you do something good to somebody else, you're doing it to yourself. Every bad deed that you ever do, you do it to yourself. Once you've lived every human life and experienced every emotion and everything in existence, you'll have grown enough to be born. And the man says, so the universe, it's just an egg, God replies. And now it's time to send you on to your next life. And he sends him off on his way. It's a great short story.
It is.
Now, I don't necessarily agree with all the premises within that short story, but I do love it. It's a really nice example of past and future lives.
Yeah.
But to bring back to your question, my understanding is that we choose to have certain lifetimes. We have to have multiple lifetimes to grow and evolve. Some of those will be very short. Some of those will be very long. Some are in between. Some we will have everything that we desire. We'll be born to a wealthy family. We'll have money all of our life. We'll have the perfect job, the perfect partner, great kids, all of those things. But you won't necessarily grow hugely as an individual. And let's say you have a lifetime where you're in the 1800s and you're running a workhouse and you're very, very unkind to the women in that workhouse. Well, perhaps your next 3 or 4 lifetimes, you're going to live as a woman and go through some very unkind experiences so that in that great story of your life, that oversoul story, that book that tells has each individual life as a chapter, that you can grow as an individual and see as an oversoul that I did this and I impacted people in this way. And then this happened to me and I grew and I learned. So my understanding is that each life is a lesson that we choose to have, good, bad, and indifferent. And those that are very, very difficult are traumatizing lives that add to this knowledge pot. How can you be compassionate to others unless you've experienced some trauma yourself? Truly understand that we can all be compassionate. Even those who've had a brilliant life can be compassionate. I'm not saying they can't. But if you've not experienced great trauma, you don't necessarily understand it when you see trauma in others. It kind of skips by you. So there's another great book, also a fairly short story, not as short as The Egg, and it's called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Many people will know the story. It was released in the 1960s, written by Richard Bach.
Okay. And
he's speaking in metaphors. Jonathan is a seagull who lives in a colony by the sea. The colony has a set way of living. Jonathan doesn't like that. He wants to fly. He wants to do the loops and be this amazing flyer. And his family and the rest of the colony are like, Jonathan, just come and be with us and be the same as us. And he's like, no, I'm going to fly. And he learns some stuff. He goes out to sea, away from the colony, and he's practicing all these high dives, and he crashes into the water, nearly loses his wings. But he's gone at such a speed on his descent, he's got the thrill of it. He wants to do it again and decides to tuck his wings in if he's going to hit the water and he can't pull out of the dive. And so on his next dive down, He can't pull out of it. He tucks his wings in, shoots under the surface of the water, gets 30 or 40 feet below the surface, and there's a big fish there. And he snaffles a big fish, takes it back up, and he's like, oh, I've learned this truth. I should tell everybody in the colony. So he flies back to the colony because they're following fishing boats, picking up scraps, little tiny sprats of fish that are near the surface. Everybody's always hungry all the time, looking for food. And he's like, I've understood this thing. If we do this, you're going to get a big meal. And he decides, in his stupidity, to instead of go and try and tell them, he decides to demonstrate it. So he flies through the colony like an exocet missile, ruffles many, many feathers, and gets kicked out.
Right.
I resonate with Jonathan because he gets excommunicated from his community, as did I.
Yeah.
He gets ostracized, sent away. So he goes away and he lives on the wing, and he's flying like an albatross, living, sleeping on the wing, only going down for food, diving down, getting a good meal, off on the wing again, traveling the world, practicing his maneuvers. And there's a bit at the end of one chapter, and I'm sorry, I have to give you some, I have to tell the story of this. So sorry to those who want to go and read it. I am giving away bits in the story, but it's important for this bit of information. It looks like Jonathan dies. It doesn't necessarily say that he does, but you kind of read it that way. It looks like he's passed, but he's still in flight. So he's flying into that next realm, and these two other gulls appear in front of him, and they've got this internal glowing light, glowing from the inside, and they can outpace him effortlessly. And they're the first birds of his type that he's not been able to beat, so he follows them.
Yeah.
And they do all the maneuvers he tries to do and more. So he goes with them, and they get to this place where there are other gulls who've had his sort of experience, and there is a master, and the master is teaching them. And Jonathan learns all these wonderful things with the master and other students, and then he's talking to the master one day, and he says, Master, I keep thinking of the colony and my family back home. You just have to leave them, Jonathan. Let them be. But Master, they need to understand this. And he says, Jonathan, 10,000 lifetimes. Says, what do you mean? It took Jonathan, a gull like you, 10,000 lifetimes to get to this spot. To become wise enough and experienced enough to ask enough questions to be the gull that you are today, to have the life that you've had. Some of those gulls in that colony are on their first life. They'll go through this pattern many, many, many thousands of times. And to us, and we can relate this to the modern day, somebody who goes to work, comes home, does the same job for 50 years, comes home, watches television, gets pissed at the weekend, goes back to work on Monday morning, and we go, how do they not go mental? They're just an automaton. They're just a robot. They're just one of these NPCs, as I've heard described, of people. I disagree with that. I believe that they're in their first 10,000 lifetimes. And we just have to be, as the master said to Jonathan, we have to hold space and be patient. We have to wait. Just like we've waited for you, Jonathan, you're going to have to wait for them. So, to bring that back to you, I believe that many of the difficult situations we see in individual lives are ones that they've chosen to have in the course of that 10,000 lifetime experience, to bring their oversoul to a point where it's matured enough to become a truly seeking, an adventurer, looking with curious eyes, as you've described yourself. So for those that we see that don't have those curious eyes, are not seeking adventure, and are not interested in anything beyond whatever the latest television trend is. I haven't watched it in many, many years, so I was trying to think of a TV show, but it's probably outdated already. So, so that's what I think that's my response to that. So if someone's born and they're going to be in a wheelchair all their life, they chose that, and we shouldn't feel bad about it. We help them. if you come across them, part of your soul path and your journey is how are you going to react to somebody who's in this difficult situation? How will you help these individuals who've suffered this abuse? How will you help a refugee? That's that bit. But the bit that they've gone through, that's their journey. That's part of their experience. And you've more than likely had an experience like that in your own past.
Yeah, so this opens up a couple of questions, and it might open up actually where we talk about the spirit realm itself. So this realm clearly seems to me, looking at the way it operates, and people do suffer at the hands of corrupt individuals that may have been influenced not just by money and power, but other potential forces.
Yeah.
So they could be potentially one of their first 10,000 lives, or whatever you described before. These individuals that are not just controlling people, but harming. And it happens, as we know. There are many children in this, and animals as well, that are at the hands of pretty heinous activity. Who is controlling that then? Because I've had these conversations, Chris, where I know I couldn't harm someone else. I can't harm a spider, and I struggle to understand why someone would harm a child or an animal. It doesn't enter. I can't get my head around it. So they have to be different than I am. Now, I'm not saying I'm better. I'm not saying that, but I'm not the same. I can't be, because it actually makes me feel physically ill if it enters my head of imagination of a torture, like as an example. That makes me feel physically sick. So, and these activities are going on, but that doesn't seem to me to be human.
No, it's a great question, and I think there's a whole subtle range of elements that bring you and me, actually, because I resonate with what you just said. I can't imagine hurting anybody. I try to always be kind. I fail miserably often.
Sure.
I'm not someone to go fighting someone physically or beating someone up. In school I defended myself, but I would defend myself and then step back, and I wouldn't go in for the kill. I just couldn't do that. I've always wanted to be nice to people, and any time that I have hurt someone, I remember in my teenage years, I had a friend and I got jumped, and we defended ourselves, and I hurt someone, and it made me be sick.
Yeah.
As a 15-year-old, I hurt this guy's jaw, and it made I was physically sick.
Yeah.
I can't believe I've done that. Yes, I was defending myself. There is justification. I couldn't see it within me to be a violent person and to get off on someone else's pain. So I agree with you. And I think there are many who might fit into that bill because of their own astrological setup that they chose, that blueprint to start their life off, that give them the capacity. Then there's those who've been abused and tortured and beaten, who then want to propagate that and pass it on because that's all they know, and they maybe don't recognize it. And then there are those who are under the control of some non-physical entity, which is pressurizing, nudging, cajoling them into doing these heinous things. And I think there's a lot of that. I've seen a lot of that, and I've had to work against it. And that's really been a primary focus of mine in working with the spirit realm is to help protect people, to help defend those who need defended, to stop trauma from happening to families, to children, as as many people as possible, whoever comes across my path.
Yeah.
And yes, there are some cruel individuals out there. I think we have to state that there are some people who just have that capacity, and whatever the universe is, the dark and the light. When we look at either the Eastern symbol of the yin yang, or if you go to like South America, the Mayan symbol, the Hunab Ku, which is kind of looks like the yin yang. It's like an elaborate version of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's 50% white and 50% black.
Mm.
It's not 75-25 or 60-40. It's 50-50 in both cases. And the dark is there and the light is there. And there are those who work for the dark, and there are those of us, you and I included, who strive to work for the light. And so it's this balancing force within the universe. And I can't justify their behaviours because I can't see there's any justifications.
No.
But I can see why people are led to do it, and also understand why others are perhaps forced or pressured into doing it by some unseen force that whispers in their ear.
And it sounds, I mean, this past 12 months, I've very much gone down a Gnostic route to try and understand that, where maybe this realm has an overlay, a parasitic force that is looking to drain humanity, to use us as batteries, to keep us in a low vibration. You've got the demiurge in the Archon. And the Archon, in the Gnostic story, and a lot of that kind of resonated with me when I started going down that path. Really, it's like, well, that would make sense because there's so much beauty in this world, but evil in this world as well, and humanity is certainly capable of great things, but seems to be restricted so much as well, which then again opens up the very interesting path that you're on in terms of the spirit realm, because there's obvious to me influence from the many realms, as you say.
Yeah, there are. I think to break down some of the categories, there are spirits who have access to our realm, who live in another realm, and they have connection points or terminals within this realm that they can connect to us and can drain us. Those beings, those entities, were never human, never will be human, but they use us as batteries and they feed off us. There are some that are in that realm who feed in other ways and they try and avoid us. And there are some in that realm who are good entities or beings that can be crafted or created. We can create them. If you start a business or start a team, like football teams have an entity, the crowd mentality. It changes individuals as the crowd works as this unique hyper force of not just the combined forces of individuals, but it's like there's this super consciousness that governs them all. So this, we go into the realm, in Western terms, these are called egregors. So I don't know if you've heard that term before.
Yeah.
So an egregor is a created entity. And egregors can work for the good. You start a business, you start treating the business as if it's like a person. You're giving it time, you're giving it effort, you're putting your energy towards this entity. And you create a business, you can create things for the good. But these things can run away and take control and become more powerful than those who started it. There's, a variety of examples. One would be a collective of people who start a commune, and they'd start it back in the 60s or 70s, and it looks great, and somebody who sees them and visits and spends some time goes, oh, these people are fantastic, they're living off the land, they've got this great egalitarian collection of people working together, nobody's in charge, blah, blah, blah. Then they go away and do something else for 20 years, and then they come back and it's all gone to shit. There's abuse, there's sexual traumas, there's this group who are in charge who are tormenting and abusing the others. And it's like, how did it go wrong? In many ways, it's down to those in charge feeding the egregore of the place that then feeds back to them, and takes control and gets them doing things that they shouldn't be doing. A brilliant example of an egregore is in, and I'm not a fan of Disney. I think Disney's part of the corrupt elite system, but they always tell you what they do, and they show things within movies like The Matrix and others that give you this understanding. There's a very early Disney movie called Fantasia.
Oh, yeah.
So in Fantasia, there's the wizard, and Mickey is the apprentice of the wizard. The wizard tells him to clean up the space, gives him a broom and a bucket of water, and then the wizard goes off to do something.
That's right.
And Mickey puts a spell on the broom, gives it consciousness, so creates an egregore, and the broom starts doing what a broom does, sweeping up, pouring water, sweeping up, pouring water, cleaning the place, and then it multiplies, and then it won't stop pouring buckets of water because it gets too powerful for Mickey, and it starts causing damage. It's flooding the place, it's causing mayhem, and then the wizard comes back and he's powerful enough and he sorts it all out. So Mickey created an egregore and then lost control of it, and that happens to many, many people.
You can see this with AI.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And then there are many people who will get themselves into a particular headspace. One of those headspaces is through alcohol, another is through drugs, sometimes through abuse, where they live in this tormented zone. And you often see it with alcoholics and addicts, that it's like they're talking to somebody and they're having this two-way conversation with this non-physical being who's saying to them, you need to drink, you're worthless, you're useless without a drink, you can't survive another day, another hour, another minute without alcohol. Go to the shop, go and buy the vodka, go and buy the whiskey, go and buy this, you need to drink, you're nothing without it. And they follow the instructions. So these are entities that will sit with an individual and tap into them and feed off of them. So they feed off our energy in motion, our energy that's fluid, that's in motion. E is the symbol for energy, as in E equals MC squared. E is for energy. E in motion, emotion. Our emotions, fear, love, sadness, happiness. All those things are our emotions, and they feed off of them. So there are a huge number of people, a massive number of people, who actually have an attachment of an egregore of some kind, and others who have an attachment of an entity that was never an egregore. It was already out there, and it's tapped into them. And some of these entities get to have a whole harem of people that they're feeding off. There is one entity that I don't really want to name it, but it's known worldwide, and it visits people in the dream state. And when I told you about visiting that family, this was the same entity. And I've had to work with other families that the same entity, when you ask them to describe what it looks like, they always describe it the same way. Tall, skinny, wearing a hat, all black. That's as much as I want to describe it as. Some of your listeners will undoubtedly recognise and be shouting the name at the screen at the moment. I just don't want to give it any power by saying any more than that. But this entity and others have this unbelievable power that they are harvesting from multiple people. That specific entity is known in Australia, America, the UK, the whole world.
I think I know.
All over.
Yeah, I think I know. Yeah.
There's been a movie made on that one as well, I believe, and there's like websites full of stories talking about it. And it sits on the end of people's beds and causes mayhem. So there's some who are very powerful like that, and some who just harvesting the energy of one individual person.
It's interesting that even the normal day-to-day person could allow an entity in. Like you're saying, alcohol is a big one, isn't it? Because that lowers your vibration, therefore you're going to open the potential for. And I've seen it in people, as you will have seen it, and many others will have seen it in people. I had pubs, didn't I? So it's like the demon takes over.
Yeah.
Hence why they call it spirits. And there's a deity, isn't there? There's a demon called Al-Kul, isn't there? I think it's pronounced something like that. And I've seen it. I've witnessed it.
Yeah, the understanding about alcohol and the roots of the word alcohol, that it comes from Al-Kul. The word Al-Kul apparently is the same root word for the English word ghoul, when something is good.
That's right. Yeah.
So there's that whole, and obviously we drink spirits, and one of the big spirits in the Middle East where they don't allow people to drink alcohol is the jinn, and here one of the spirits you can drink is the jinn.
That's correct.
So many correlations
to
the spirit realm when drinking alcohol. Yeah. I'm Scottish, so I do have a bit of whiskey now. I do have a little bit of alcohol, but never to excess. I only ever have a small amount, and that's it. I'll have a couple of whiskeys, or I'll have a beer, and then that's me. Then I'll drink a cup of tea or water or something else. I will not get drunk. I will not get to that blackout stage. In shamanic realms, if you go as a shamanic practitioner and do the right kind of work outside a nightclub and look above the nightclub, you will see these things just waiting for people to get blacked out.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah,
waiting. Yeah, waiting for people to get to that point where the vehicle for your intention, for your spirit, your body is the vehicle of your intention. And as it moves forward through space and time, your soul is the driver. And if you bug out and black out, you've climbed in the back seat and fallen asleep while the vehicle's still driving. And that leaves the door open for some other spirit to step in to drive the vehicle. You wake up in the morning, in prison, in hospital, wherever it is, going, I didn't do that. I don't remember that. Well, you're on video having stabbed someone or doing this or that or the other. And that's because it wasn't necessarily them. I do believe there are many people who've ended up in a whole series of bother because they've bugged out and something else has stepped in and committed some act. Exactly. Yeah.
It shows this place is just not what you perceive when you're growing up. There's so many layers to this place. It's untrue.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating, but you have to. This is where sort of spiritual hygiene is important, isn't it? I mean, you'll know this more than anyone because you will have come across. But what I'm really keen to ask you: so do you see these entities in your mind's eye, or do you see them with your physical eyes? How does that work for you?
So personally, for me, sometimes I do see them and sometimes I don't. I see it's like you can't see the wind, but you can see the effect that the wind has.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's like that. And other times I've seen it, particularly when one has connected to a human, you can see it in that person coming through them. And I've seen it around them. So it's a variable thing for me. But in the work that I do now, many of them have tried to hide away because I want to go in there with a big spiritual sword and start sorting things out and cutting away these ties to other people and to help my fellow man and fellow woman. I want to help people. I believe that's part of my task, and it's a very difficult one at times. So often, if an entity that's attached to someone sees that, it'll go into the background. If there's someone there who can disconnect them and cut them off from their food source, they'll often sit in the background and try not to be seen. But there are ways to see their impact, their effect, and oftentimes to actually see them as well. Sometimes you see them as like a shadow around a person. It's like having a shadow that has independent movement. And other times there's almost a physical face that can be seen. So it's a variable thing in my own personal experience.
Has anything scared you?
Well, that's a good question. If I thought about it in a certain way, it could scare me, but I haven't. I don't think you should be doing this job if you're not. If you can't walk in the dark, I can go into a forest and walk in pitch black, and I'm not frightened, and I'll just keep walking. That's not to say I've not had some scary experiences and had a bit of a fright, but then I resolve myself. I went through it. I'll give you an example. I went through an experience 2012. It was the winter time, so it was either the beginning or the end of 2012, and I was making some spiritual tools at the time, making lots of it, and it was having an impact on the energy around. I was visited by the black helicopters on a number of days when I first started making this stuff. And then I was visited by what are called the shadow people. So I smoked back then. I don't smoke anymore. And I would go and stand outside, out in the decking, out my back door to smoke. And the kitchen window, I think it was net curtains that were up in the kitchen window that were all kind of folded over, so they created these lines of shadow on the decking outside. So as I've walked from the kitchen to the back door, which is only 5 feet, I saw, and the back door was already open, I saw this human figure, but it was just blackness. It was just a shadow running from left to right across the decking, and I heard a noise. So I lived at the time at an end terrace house, and so I was at the end terrace and looking to my right outside the door with another 3 houses in this short terrace. So I had a 4-meter decking, a little bit of a gap, then there's a 6-foot fence, and then my neighbour's garden, and the neighbour had spotlights and motion sensor lights coming on all the time. So if any cats or anything got into their garden, the lights would always come on. So I've seen this shadow, and I saw in the light that was coming from the kitchen on the decking with these bars with the light shining through the curtains. I saw this human figure run across the decking, and in the time it took me to lean forward, which was, a second, and look to the right, there was nothing there. I then heard a noise in the neighbour's back garden that sounded like a dog or some bigger animal, like a badger or something like that, was moving stuff in their garden. No lights came on. Then I heard something behind their shed. Then I looked the other way, and there was next door, there's a gap between my house and the next, and there was 2 in a block, and another gap, and then 2 in a block, and then another gap. And the second block up, I saw this in the back garden, there was light streaming through from between the houses that lit up a portion of the back garden, and I saw this human shadow figure, and then I saw them run through the gap between the houses. And then I heard down my side path a clatter, and I had a 6-foot fence down the side of the house near the front with a gate in it, and I then stuck my head round the corner another second to look around that, and there was nobody there. So like four or five things all in the space of about 3 or 4 seconds, and there was a chill ran down my spine. Like I knew I wasn't alone. So I went back into the house. I grabbed 2 crystals that I use in some of my work, and walked back out onto the deck and stood there and was like, right, if you want it, like, you're non-physical, I'm physical. You want physicality, I have physicality. If you want to come and stand and trade, then now's the time.
Yeah.
And I knew that was one of those moments. I had to stand tall. I had to stand there and shine that light and just show no fear.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying there wasn't a moment where it sent that shiver right down my spine, because it was.
I'm sure.
It
was
up and down the spine.
I bet it was, yeah.
But I had to face it down. I had to stand tall in that moment, and within about 5 minutes, I stood there for a while. But within about 5 minutes, you could just. There was a sense. The sense of presence that was there initially, it left. And I could feel that I was standing on my own in the back garden again. And I stood there for another 15 minutes or so. And then I put some protection around the property, did some stuff that I'd been taught to do.
Yeah.
And then went away back in the house and made a cup of tea. So there's been some really interesting stuff. I've had things thrown at me. I've had fire alarms go off in buildings that I was doing a cleanse for, where we've had to be evacuated. Yeah, I've had a good friend of mine who is a practicing witch, who was dealing with an entity that she asked me to go and help her with, and the thing took over her and started speaking through her to me.
Wow.
And it was,
I was going to ask about something like that.
Oh man, it was vicious, really vicious, really intense, very cruel, really trying to diminish me, diminish her, diminish everybody, and attack our strengths. And it was a battle. It was a battle. But I just had to follow the teachings, stand tall. You know, if you show fear, that's, you know, it's an emotional state. If you show that and let it in, had on any of those occasions gone into the fear state and stayed there, I believe I would have had to give up this part of my path. I couldn't. I don't think I could do it, because sometimes, you know, to go and visit a family who've had real trauma, who've had things being moved in their house, physical damage to their bodies, scratches, fear, anxiety, you can't demonstrate that. You can't show that. You have to go in there and know that there's a solution to this, that there's a way to help them, and that there's no fear. You know, to stand tall and show no fear, and it has an impact. So, yeah, I've had some scary moments, but I've never ran away.
You know, I think that what's come to my mind is that I'd imagine up and down, well, all over the world, that spiritual type people or people on a path could maybe be a bit overconfident, or they don't know enough, or they don't have the tools, or they're pretending as well, you know, that they have the tools, and that's going to lead into all sorts of trouble, you know, for the people that are being attacked by entities, by that person that's pretending or is overconfident.
Yep.
There's a huge risk here, isn't there? This is there's an unknown. You don't know what you're dealing with. You can't see it properly.
Yep. That's right.
You can't feel it properly.
100%. So I've had personal dealings exactly like that, where beautiful souls, lovely, lovely people who would just want to see the good in the world say things like, if we just manifest it, if we just project out only to see goodness and only have goodness, then we won't be affected. There are no dark forces. Well,
the new age thing.
Right? I'm just manifesting. I'm just working with the light. I don't see any dark. Well, it's still there. This is still stuff still happening in Gaza in the physical. There's still people being abused. There are still people having objects and themselves thrown across their houses. I worked with a woman. I do a lot of work in England. I live in England now, and I was working with someone in Derbyshire, and this person was in her home on her own, and had her arm broken in her bed and was thrown across the room and hit a wall, and couldn't drive for 6 months. One of her family members knows me and contacted me and said, can you please come and help my mum? And they had been brought to that point by somebody in the spiritual world who refused to accept that there were negative entities, and had done a reading for that lady the night before. She goes home and then has this experience where she's thrown across the room. And when they reached out to the person, the other person, and said, this is what's happened, that person said, oh, it'll just be ancestral stuff. It'll be ancestral stuff for your mum that she's got to work through. And that person says, no, look, I've just sat with my mum for the last 24 hours. I didn't sleep. My mum's frightened to go to sleep. She doesn't want anybody. She doesn't want to be in her house on her own. She wants someone to be with her. This is not just some ancestral trauma that's coming up. This is a being. This is an entity that threw her across the room. And that person couldn't handle it. So then they came to me, and I went to give them a hand and help sort that situation out. And actually approached, because I know the other person, I approached that person and said, look, remember this situation? Like, I saw the bruises. I've got photographs of the bruises on this woman's arm, and at the back of the arm around here, there's these black marks that look like fingerprints. It looks like someone's gripped her arm, and you can see these black bruise marks on the back of her left arm, it is.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's not all love and light. There are some darkness out there, but like, I'm a very happy, joyous person. I try to avoid a lot of this stuff. It's not something that I want to do every single day. I want to do beautiful things for the most part. My sound therapy work, my other magical work, working with Reiki, it's a beautiful, beautiful life. And the old phrase, you shouldn't stare at the darkness too long because the darkness is staring back at you. It's very true. But that doesn't mean to say that we don't have to occasionally turn around and defend ourselves and defend others, which is, in those kind of circumstances, that's what a shamanic practitioner will do.
It's about balance, isn't it? I suppose, Chris, you've got to balance this. Like you said before, you deal with food better because you are a being that requires food. So you've got to balance this human experience out as best as you possibly can. Do you feel that you're on a mission, though? Do you think you're divinely protected, or do you just feel this is your blueprint?
Another good question, Ant. I do believe that this is the journey that I've set out for myself. I do feel a lot of protection, and there's been a lot of things said to me about protection that I have. However, that said, I don't take it for granted ever. I put daily protection out for myself when I do any work, from working on an individual with a Reiki session, or a group guided meditation, or a group sound bath, or a retreat, or anything like that I'm running. There's protection added in. So I'll do my daily protection in the morning as soon as I get up, and then let's say I'm going to do a treatment in the early afternoon just before I start. Then there's additional protection for myself, for the client, for both of us together, to create this magical space that is protected for that process.
Yeah.
If I'm then going to be invited to go along to help remove an entity or to clear a house space or to help a spirit move on, there are certain other precautions that I've learned from people all across the world, from teachers, particularly a Brazilian teacher, friend of mine, who taught me certain things that you need to physically do for yourself when you're working in this realm to protect yourself so that you don't get infected. It's really important. So, yeah, I do feel like I've got a bit of a mission to do stuff to help people, to work for the light. You know, it doesn't need to be some great all singing, all dancing thing that's known by everybody. It's quietly working in the background, doing stuff. You know, that's very fulfilling. And those moments where I help somebody or help a family, they're so fulfilling. And that's enough for me. You know, I don't need that proclaimed and broadcast. Just to do that is really important. You said a point we discussed a little bit a few minutes ago about somebody who thinks that they're okay, perhaps overstepping their own capabilities or understandings. They haven't learned about this stuff, or they refuse to learn about it. So one of the stories I wanted to share a very brief bit about, just because I could speak for 2 or 3 hours just on this one story. I've got some really good friends of mine, family, who've got a house that they're renovating, and I've got into the spiritual realm, met a bunch of people, met this woman who's an artist, and it was arranged for her to paint a mural on one of the walls. She took over the house for a few weeks. They actually went on holiday at one point and left her in the house, and she was drinking alcohol. She was inviting all sorts of entities, opening portals, drew portals on the wall as part of the mural, and some deity figures that were not necessarily good ones as part of the mural, and caused mayhem for this family. And beautiful people, really beautiful people. So I got involved. This is one of the big stories that's going to be in my book, and go into a lot more detail about it. But I got involved, and we had to strip that wall. We had to strip the mural off the wall, do a massive cleanse for the individuals, for the mum and dad, for the kids, for the house. And it wasn't just once, this was ongoing. I had to do some stuff, particularly with my friend, the dad. We had to go to a sacred site where things had happened. We had to go to other places. We had to do stuff at the house on multiple occasions for him and for the house. It was a struggle. It was a really difficult thing. And this was all brought about by someone who didn't put protections up, who didn't believe and refused to accept that there was these negative forces out there at play, and just opened these portals expecting these great deities to be powerful and benevolent, despite many stories describing these specific deities as being at times malevolent. So really, really powerful experience. And that was just 2 years ago.
Wow.
In central England. Really, really, really interesting. I don't want to say the location because I don't want to give stuff up for the family. They're good friends of mine, and it's again not wanting to give power and energy to these things. There's a fine balance, a fine line you have to tread to deal with it, but not give energy to it. So very, very fascinating story and experience that was.
It makes you wonder. Well, it'll make people wonder. It's clear to me, that we go back to the political corporate powers that be. that will have people with a full understanding on how this game works that would use such tricks to bring in portals, to open portals, to change reality, to influence reality. You know, and most people would probably think it's complete madness and nonsense, but you know, you've experienced it. I've had small experiences to give me enough to know that this realm is not just a 3D realm. There is a lot more going on, and you know, I think of things like CERN. I think of even things like concerts. You know, I remember when I went watching the Rolling Stones back in '94. It was, they were doing the Voodoo Lounge tour at Wembley Stadium, and I was stood right at the front, so close I actually touched Mick Jagger when he danced past me at one point. But I was right beneath this silver cobra that breathed fire. It was called the Voodoo Lounge tour. They were spell casting. You know, when Sympathy for the Devil played at the end, it was powerful. It was powerful, and it stayed in your head as well. There was a massive energy harvesting. Obviously, back in '94, I had no idea. I was just stoned. You know, I had no idea. I was at the front enjoying a concert.
Yeah, that's a very profound point, and very interesting that you bring up the Rolling Stones. I used to love their music, and yes, there's magical spells happening. Particularly that song, Sympathy. You know, I think it was that song during the Stones concert in California that some bad stuff happened.
That's correct.
At Altamont,
the rituals that happen.
Yeah, there's a new band actually that's been out just recently that I was talking to a good friend of mine over in Lincolnshire, and he had contacted me and he said, "Have you heard of this band?" And I hadn't heard of them. And I've got a very eclectic taste, from metal and rock to pop and classical and everywhere in between. So this is a metal band, and an English band. Certainly the lead singer's English. So my friend said, you know, go and have a listen to this band, and he started really promoting them to me. And I listened to the startings of a couple of tracks, really didn't like the feel that I got from the music, and just pushed it to the side. A few weeks later, that same friend was talking to him, and he said, "Can you tell me your opinion on that band, please?" I said, "Well, I don't really like the energy of their music. I found it very difficult to hear. I actually couldn't listen to a whole song. I had to switch it off, and I felt like there was some spell work going on." And he said, "Oh my God, I felt the same." He says, "I just looked yesterday at my Spotify time spent listening to different music, and in the previous 2 weeks, he'd spent something like 50, 60 hours just listening to that one band." And he says, "I think they've got a grip on me. I feel like, because I've been promoting them to everybody, I've been telling them to listen to this band. The band created a backstory for their characters, alter egos for their artists. So the band is called Sleep Token."
Okay. And
the guy who's the lead singer, I could be wrong on this, but if I remember correctly, his stage persona is called Vessel. And
really?
And they worship this deity called Sleep, and he is a vessel for sleep.
Oh, wow.
Honestly. So
interesting.
Yeah, so my friend in Lincolnshire is now speaking to many people and saying, please, you've got to be careful with a Sleep Token. Their last tour that they did in the States, every show sold out in about an hour. So
very interesting.
Very popular.
Well, I found Ozzy's passing quite interesting, I'll be honest. I've got a client who was his security just a week previous to the gig, and because I had a chat with him before he was going to be his security, and I said, you know, he's likely to pass away soon. That's why he's doing the gig and this and the other. And when we had a session, he said, there's nothing wrong with him apart from he's bad on his legs. He's fine. He's not dying. He's not going anywhere. He's all right. Now I've had conversations with other people thinking maybe he's gone down the route of euthanasia afterwards, you know, because that's another agenda that's at play as well. But what I do find interesting is the passing of the guard, if you like, to young blood. Now, so I know very little about Youngblood apart from the fact that he studied where my daughter now studies in London, and I've listened to some of his songs previous to the now noise about him, and I think, yeah, good singer, great, like, you know, got a bit about him and this, that, and the other. But there was my missus showed me a photograph from the concert. I didn't watch the concert, but she showed me a photograph, and it was, I think, Ozzy was either in a coffin or Youngblood was in a coffin. I don't know if it was at the concert, but it was at some point this happened, and Ozzy I was touching his forehead, and it was almost like he's passing the spirit on to Youngblood, and I was like, Youngblood also came out about Ozzy will always be part of my songs, part of my voice, part of this, and I'm thinking, yeah, of course he is. He's passed the guard on, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I saw a fair bit of that myself and came to similar conclusions. So that's interesting.
Did you?
Yeah, mate. Yeah. His music's not even that similar to Sabbath's.
Not at all. It's nothing like it at all.
Yeah.
But they've obviously seen a vessel that's going to be useful to continue this magic. And by the way, for people that are listening, when I mentioned earlier on about there's magic in this realm and there's magic in me, it doesn't necessarily mean it's good or bad. I'm not saying it's either. It's magic. So
magic's like a knife, and you can use magic. You can use a knife to carve the most beautiful object out of any material, or you can use it to murder someone. It's just a knife, and magic's the same.
It's a tool, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a tool.
Yeah,
but that's very, very interesting that you came to that same conclusion, because sometimes I'm thinking I'm going a bit mad. You know, like I have these conversations, me and my missus can talk about it, then you can't talk to just anybody about it. You know what I mean? And, you know, you're telling me that Oz is just passing his spirit on to Youngblood, you know, but
yeah, or perhaps he's passing on the egregor or the spirit that has been feeding him.
Absolutely.
And now there's a new soul to feed off, and Youngblood gets the benefit, the fame, the money, you know, whatever else that goes along with that. But he has to pay the price. You know, we've all, you know, heard the story of the Crossroads, maybe even seen the movie Crossroads. About doing the deal with the devil and, you know, getting that fame. The Stones are a great example of that, you know, ending up with songs like Sympathy and Voodoo Lounge and the various albums that they've created, and they're still going. They're almost,
they're all going. They're all still going. I mean,
Yeah.
I was watching the Who are touring at the moment. Roger Daltrey's 81 or 82. You know, I went watching the Who 20 odd years ago, and they were old then, you know, but they were fantastic. And I'm looking at Roger Daltrey and I'm thinking, wow. I mean, bless him, he looks really old. Frankie Valli's been rolled out. I don't know how old Frankie Valli is, but it's almost well, it is embarrassing, you know, that this guy is rolled out the way he is. It's Bob Dylan even said it, didn't he? You know, and I think Tony Iommi said there was always a fifth member of Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
You know, it is interesting that they certainly, like I say, it's an egregor creating an entity that drives them, but that's them selling their soul, is it not?
Yeah, that's right, and that's not necessarily to an egregor, which, you know, it shows that there's quite a complexity to the spirit realm. It's not just they're this, they're that, they're either ghosts or poltergeists or they're people who've died and passed on and hanging about. There's this whole range in the categories that a non-physical being can be. So when I go along to deal with something in a house or connection to a family or an individual, my first task is to try and figure out where within that range this particular spirit is. What am I dealing with here? You know, I've got to try and figure out that first before I do anything else, because that's really important. If it's like I had to deal with something for a family in Staffordshire last year. It was a brilliant experience. They've got a farm, a couple 100 acres, really, really nice family. 3 generations living in the same house, and some of them getting assaulted by these spirits, getting coins, 1 and 2 pence coins thrown at them. And the day that the farmer, who I know his cousin, so that's how I got to know them, and the farmer says, "Can you please get your spiritual dude to come up and help, because my wife has been assaulted. She got hit that day by a cluster of coins that were thrown across the kitchen, that her head, hit her ankle, hit her body, and was physically hurting her." So it was time to they saw it as, oh, there's a ghost in the house, and it's an old 17th century farmhouse that they live in. So there's lots of people died there. It's actually quite close to some old mines, and this was, it turns out, we found out that it was a field hospital for this series of mines. So there was a number of people died there, and we actually found that there was a spirit, someone who had died in 1947, in the winter of 1947, which was a terrible winter. It lasted for months and months and months, and this person had gone to visit the farm and had ended up dying there, and it had been covered up, and so the spirit lingered, and he died because he'd bought some food for his animals, but he also, on the way back to his horse and cart, in this thick 5 feet of snow that he'd managed to eventually get to this farm, as he was on his way back, he killed and stole 2 geese or ducks, so birds anyway. And somebody within the farm caught him, and he picked money out his pocket to pay for them and threw these pennies to say, "Oh, there, I'm paying for them." And the understanding we've came to is, this was 1947, the Second World War had just ended, every man knew how to shoot, many were armed, and that the person who shot him likely thought as he went for those coins that he might have been going for a gun, and so the person shot him and he died, and they covered it up, and his spirit lingered, and he had been throwing coins at this family for 70 years. And and over the course of 3 days did a whole series of things, protection, cleansing, finding out his story, and eventually did a beautiful soul release for him and some other spirits who turned up, who saw what was going on and wanted to leave. And we had a little ceremony with the whole family, these 3 generations of these tough farmers who are like, see it, believe it kind of people, but they've seen enough and experienced enough that they know that there are ghosts. And as we held this ritual and ceremony to do the soul release and say goodbye and to honour this person and others, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. It was an amazing experience, really profound. And I've got a great relationship with that family now. If ever I want to go and park up my van for a few days in the middle of nowhere and just get some time on my own, I've got an open invite to go and park up on their farm. So yeah, some very, very interesting experiences can be had in that regard.
You mentioned earlier before we started filming about you might want to read a passage from a book. Is that right?
I do. I've got it on my phone.
Okay.
So excuse me looking at my phone.
No problem.
I'm also going to put some goggles on just so that I can read it properly. Now, I want to give you, I want to give you a little preamble as to why I'm going to read this out.
Yeah.
And it's because some of the work that I've been doing in recent years has been to fix the damage done by others. And it's time now to start explaining this truth or this understanding. Of course, as I said at the beginning, and I'll say it again, I could be wrong. This is just my understanding from my experiences, and I'm not trying to say that I know it all. I don't. I'm still learning. I'm still practicing. I'm still studying. But I feel strongly enough that, and I've had enough experiences that I feel that this is correct, but it could be wrong. And this stems from beginning to work in the mystery schools and the studies that came from that. And also I was visiting, I was in Scotland at the time. This is back 2012 or so. My friend had a shop in a town called Lanark, which is an ancient town, ancient capital. A royal borough with a fascinating history. And I met this old guy who I hope's still alive, but he was in his 80s at the time. And we spoke about books. And I said, "Oh, have you read this book?" And he went, "Yeah, I have. Have you read this book?" I was like, "Yeah, I have." And this was the only person I'd ever met who'd read some of these obscure books that I had read. So he would make a point of popping into the shop because he lived locally. I had to travel some distance. He would pop in and say to the owner, "Message for Chris. There's a book he should read. Here's the details." Or he would drop a book off.
Yeah.
And I would leave books for him or give references for him to get a book. So the shopkeeper said to me one day, "Message for you. Here's the name of the book. No other information. Just," he opened the door, stuck his head in and said, "Please tell Chris this book. He needs to read it." And then off he went. So I bought the book. And the book's thick. And it's an esoteric study or an esoteric explanation of the initiate's path on the mystery schools. It's a hidden story within a hidden story within a hidden story. The author is somebody who was very well known in occult circles in the 20th century, who wrote the story about himself, created a pseudonym for the story character, and a nom de plume for, he wrote it in another name. So it's like hidden within hidden within hidden, which is typical for an occultist who's writing a book. Brilliant book. But I had been researching certain things actually since I was probably in my early 20s. There was a particular field of study that I was looking at that over the course of the years, and I'm 51 now, so this has been a long time. It was probably 2021 when I first delved into this particular subject. So it's been 30 years in the making, this viewpoint that I'm at today. And having read this whole book, and much of it describes some of the initiate's path, which I started to go down, as I mentioned earlier, and kind of went my own way and took my own initiate's path with my own mentors rather than with the schools. But this one book, amongst many, came to me, and within this book, there was one particular section that stuck out above all the rest of the whole book, and it's a great book. And when the right time came and the right conversation happened, I would whip that book out, go to that page and read it to a person. Now, I still have the book, but it's in storage. So I downloaded the PDF and I've got it on my phone. And I've probably read this a few times, well, quite a few times to a number of people. And the subject it's really discussing is spiritualism. Spiritualism is different from spirituality. It's a nuance, but there is a difference. And it particularly talks about these unseen forces and how they would get involved in our world to try and suck our energies and get us into that soul trap that we discussed earlier. So to set the scene, our initiate in the book is visiting one of the teachers, one of the mystery school teachers, and he's in, I think, France or Italy. He's in Europe. So he's met someone, and they've invited him along to a local class. And this bunch of people are sitting, listening to a teacher. And the teacher's not got a set script. He's got some things to say, but he's being led by questions from the floor. And he's been talking about a couple of things. And he says to them, in fact, I'll just read at this point. He looked around at our faces as though to indicate that he had arrived at the most important point of the evening. And so now we must look at an esoteric truth which touches on the very edge of what is permissible. What I have to say will be greatly disturbing for many people of modern times. It will disturb because it is generally taken for granted that clairvoyancy, mediumship, and spiritualistic activity are somehow linked with spiritual development and consequently of benefit to mankind. Unfortunately, this is far from the truth. A vast amount of our modern so-called spiritualist literature pertains to channeling and clairvoyancy, which is far from beneficial for the development of mankind. Indeed, not to mince words, I should tell you that it is distinctly harmful. I must now make a statement which will introduce you to a concept which was, until comparatively recently, one of the deepest secrets of the esoteric schools. In some ways, the moon is the greatest problem of esoteric lore. The moon is not at all what it appears to be. At the end of the last century, and this was written in the 20th, so they're meaning the ending of the 19th century, an astounding revelation was made as a result of dissent among members of secret schools. Information hitherto guarded jealously by the most enclosed of the inner orders was made public. The secrets disclosed pertain to a far deeper level of knowledge than has hitherto been made exoteric by the schools, even in this enlightened age. His trace of cynicism seemed to go by unnoticed about the enlightened age. Our purpose here is not to document how so deep an esoteric idea was made public, or even to assess whether it was wise for this idea to be brought out into the open. All of this has been dealt with in the literature, and if any of you wish to follow this up, I will give you a few titles later. In a nutshell, what was made public during this conflict in the schools was the truth that our moon is a sort of counterweight to another sphere, which remains invisible to ordinary vision. This counterweighted sphere is called, in esoteric circles, the eighth sphere. We must be careful with these words, for in spite of what I have just said, this region is not itself a sphere, nor is it a moon. Even to locate it behind the physical moon is not correct, for in the spiritual realm, spaces and distances are different. The truth is that this eighth sphere does not pertain to anything we are familiar with on the physical plane. Yet we must use words from our own vocabularies whenever we wish to denote its existence. Were we to use a word which fits most appropriately this sphere, we should really call it a vacuum. Certainly, vacuum is a more appropriate term than sphere, for the eighth sphere sucks things into its own shadowy existence. This sphere is lower in the scale of being than the seventh sphere, which is the earth. It acts as a sort of demonic conduit to suck into its maws certain degenerate spiritual forms on the earth. It is a shadow sphere controlled by shadow beings. However, the fact that they are shadow beings should not lead us to demote or underestimate their capabilities. In many respects, they are more intelligent than man, for they are not limited by the power of love, as is mankind. The operation of this eighth sphere is complex. Its denizens, those shadowy beings for whom it is home, they wish to people their sphere with humanity, or more accurately, with human souls. Towards this end, it has erected what we might call terminals on the earth. These terminals are soul conduits, which will suck into the lower sphere a certain form of materialized spiritual energy that is engendered on the earth plane. The most usual circumstances where this materialization or engendering takes place is in seances and in other localities wherein human beings attempt to meddle against the cosmic law with the lower etheric plane. Philip, one of the students, was having difficulties with this curious account of the lunar powers and asked, "Are you saying that spiritualist activity is itself victimized by the eighth sphere?" Yes, Philip. Certain spiritualist activity is coloured by the erroneous belief that the realm of the dead is accessible to the living. In truth, mediumistic activity cannot penetrate through into the true realm of the dead. It is therefore dealing only with shadows. In doing so, it is creating fodder for the nourishment of the eighth sphere. This sucking of certain forms of human soul matter into the eighth sphere is not by any means intended for the benefit of humanity. The aim of the denizens of this world is to enhance and populate a world which may truly be described as the realm of the damned. The efforts of these denizens or demons is contrary to the evolutionary development which has been planned for the world. In truth, the human being was not designed to become a shadow being captive in a demonic sphere. It was designed to become a god. It is less than 100 years since this knowledge of the eighth sphere was made public. At first there was an outcry at this breach in the initiate knowledge, but now we can see that it has proved something of a blessing that the demonic threat has been brought out into the open. In some ways it is easier to deal with a visible enemy. Those who dabble in the supposed communication with the dead and with that spirit land which they fondly imagine lies beyond the veil have not gone unwarned. Now I could go on, but I'll pause it there. And that brings me to a main crux of a point that I know many people won't like to hear. And I want to set a bit of clarity first about my own path. So when I help a spirit move on that's got stuck here, they're not in the realm of the dead. They're in this realm. They've got stuck. That soul needs to be released. Once they move beyond and go into the true realm of the dead, they don't stay here anymore. And their soul path is not to stay here. So when someone says to me, "Oh, I've got my guide here and it's my granny," that worries me. Because I wouldn't want my granny's soul to be stuck here. Because when I pass and everybody else that she's helping pass, her spirit's stuck. And the longer a spirit is stuck here, the more forgetful it becomes. I've helped some spirits move on who couldn't remember their name, couldn't remember how they died, couldn't remember where they came from, were just completely lost. But once they go, once they cross that line, there is no communication. So, when a medium says, "I've got something for you, I'm going to speak to your dead relative," if that dead relative is stuck here, A, let's help them move on. But if they're not, B, who the hell is that? Now, if everything that we've ever done is written down in the Akashic records, which all beings can go and view, if your grandmother acted a particular way, had certain mannerisms, speech, words that she used more than others, little phrases, if she hid her jewellery in a particular place, if you lost things that way, if she didn't like that kind of behaviour, any being that can access that realm can mimic and imitate and can verbatim say what your grandmother said and pretend to be your grandmother. any of those shadow beings can. So it's my understanding, and I could be wrong, but it is my understanding that mediumistic activities are not, as was clearly stated in that literature there, are not for the benefit of humankind, and actually are a misnomer and are dangerous. And I've spoken to a few friends, because I've got a number of friends who participate in mediumistic activities, and I wholeheartedly disagree. I'm not going to stop being their friends because they're my friends, and it's not for me to tell you how to behave and how to act and what you can and can't do. I've given them advice, but that advice should always be unconditional. So there are no, you don't need to take my advice, and if you don't take it, that's okay. I'll still be your friend. But they have to be warned. And I asked a medium friend of mine, I said, can you tell me, please? And he knows a range of people in the spiritualist church movement across Northern England, knows dozens and dozens of people. I said, if you did a straw poll in your head right now of all the people that you know that give messages and do this stuff and are connecting to spirit, how many of them are ill? And he thought about it, and he's like, oh. I was like, out of 100, how many? And he's like, wow, probably 9 out of 10, 90 out of 100. If you did a straw poll of any other part of society, I don't think you're going to get that high a ratio of people who are crippled, illnesses, in wheelchairs, etc., etc. That's not to say they're all going to be ill, because they aren't all ill. Some of them have to be kept well and fed well and look well so they can preach and talk about it to others. My friend's not ill, and still participates in stuff. He's still my friend, you know. I've given him the advice. It's up to him. He can do what he wants with that. But I wouldn't take a reading from him, and he knows that. He doesn't try and offer me anything like that. But he has been warned. He's been given that advice. So it's up to him what he does. But as he pointed out, and you know, I asked him the question, there are many, many people in that movement who are ill. And sometimes it's not just them, it's those around them that get affected. Mm-hmm. So these entities will attach and say, right, I'm going to give you some insider information. But you're going to have to give me some stuff in return. And it's not balanced. They take more than they give. And I know someone who started working as a medium, and they immediately got very ill and started having epileptic seizures, and didn't recognise that the epilepsy correlated, the onset of the epilepsy correlated with the time they started this activity. So it's a very controversial thing to say, because I know a lot of people believe in it, take great faith in it, and some people make a living from it, not even necessarily a huge living. Lots of people do it for free. But there are some people out there who it is their only job. But I feel it's a necessity and a duty to point this out, that there are inherent dangers in working with spirit. I personally am very careful with that stuff. I do not believe that someone who's truly passed and has died properly and their soul has moved on, that there is any way for me or anyone else to communicate with them. I believe we're only communicating with those spirits that exist in this realm, or in an overlapping realm, or one that's come here from the 8th sphere to try and pull some energy in their way.
Well, we're living in a trickster world, aren't we?
Yeah.
It's the devil's playground.
What do you think of that, Anne, now that I've said that to you? Because I'd said I wanted to read something, but I didn't tell you what it was. What are your thoughts on that?
It does actually resonate with me in ways of I've thought of this, and I've worked closely with mediums, and I've got medium friends. You know, obviously Kev, who I work with at Drayton, Michigan, is a medium, and I remember having the conversation, thinking, how do you know that you're talking to is who they say they are.
Yeah.
You know, and that has been in my mind a lot. That we are in a very, very tricky realm, and I think that when people talk about the soul trap, one of my feelings is that I don't feel I'm going to be trapped, but I may be tricked.
Well, I think that what I've just described, that's the soul trap, is taking us into Dante's Inferno, is taking us into that hell state. And we're supposed to be moving towards the light. Whether, as in that story I mentioned earlier on, the egg, we are a god and we've got to experience all life that's ever been and before we can be born as a god, or whether we're some fractal of some godlike being, I don't know. In all my journeys with meditation and with plant medicine, I've traveled to some magical realms. I've never met an entity that I've had to get down on bended knee to. So I've never wanted to worship anything. I do give a lot of energy to like Mother Earth. The closest that you could get to fixing me towards some spiritual or religious viewpoint. I don't really like religions for obvious reasons, but animism is probably the closest that I could be pulled towards. Animism being that everything is animated. You know, I work with crystals and I believe they're animated and that they have consciousness and life, that mountains and trees and forests and rivers have consciousness. And as we go up the scale, Mother Earth, she has a consciousness, and the sun has a consciousness, and Mars and Saturn and other planets, they all have a consciousness. But they're at a different fractal level of existence. And so they have a consciousness at that level. I believe that what humans view as God is actually probably a hive mind. In the same way we can look at a termite mound or an anthill or a nest of bees or a hive or whatever, that there seems to be a greater consciousness at play, and we call it the hive mind. That these ants can build this wonderful structure underground that is almost a city, and yet you take an individual ant and its level of consciousness is not powerful enough to have created this city, but put 50,000 of them in there or however many, this hive mind, this greater connected consciousness that's greater than the sum of its parts, is powerful enough to drive the forces within this city. And I believe that humankind, if we zoom out, we are the ants and we have a super consciousness. And you can have super consciousnesses at different levels. Like I'm Scottish and people say the Scottish psyche is different from the English psyche. So there's a super consciousness of Scots and English and Welsh and Irish and so on. But then European, and there's a European consciousness, and then there's a global consciousness. And it's oftentimes that ideas for new things, new inventions seem to drop in all over the world at the same time. So some inventions get argued about that we patented it in Argentina, and we patented it in America, and we patented it in France, all at the same time within months of each other. To me, that super consciousness, that hive mind, that godlike mind that's greater than the total of us individual humans, has these conscious awarenesses, and these ideas drop in, and whoever's ready to pick that idea up and run with it will create it. How many times have you thought of something and then never gone through with it, and then 12 months later somebody else has done it?
Oh yeah.
It's come down. It's that consciousness thing that feeds it. So, you know, I do believe in consciousness at higher levels. I don't necessarily believe in deities or gods to worship, because to my mind, many of the gods that are worshipped today are actually entities that have taken control of a group. So the religious cult that I was raised in, Their God is, to my mind, is an entity who has control of their minds and is not a benevolent being, is a malevolent being. So I don't like the idea of going into either the past and picking up the religions of the past and worshipping, old Hindu gods or Buddhist gods, or these, because to me, many of them are entities that have harvested the knowledge that gives them greater power over individuals and then gives them control.
So the demiurge.
There you go. Yeah.
That's the demiurge. Interestingly as well, and we'll finish off. I mean, I'll have to get you back on, Chris, because I think we could talk for at least another 2 or 3 hours on this subject. Yes. You know what I mean? Yeah. And but we should definitely do another one. I've just finished a video actually on Steiner and the 8th sphere and Araman and AI and that kind of egregor that's happening right now, really. Just a little short video of interesting as we've been moved into the transhumanism agenda. Yeah. It's quite interesting how people like Steiner had discussed these things. Back in the day.
It's fascinating to watch it, as horrendous as it is. It's fascinating to watch this transhumanist agenda. Yeah. But I
believe in the human spirit, though, Chris. I do believe in the human spirit. I do think that we this is where our purpose comes in. This is why we have these conversations. This is why we do what we're doing, because we are human. We're having a human experience, and we're here to continue shining the light. And you do that so well. And how will people contact you, Chris, if they want to contact you? I know you're going to be doing some talks. You're going to be doing Vibe Fest. I'm down at Vibe Fest on that day as well. So good to see you again. What are you up to? How can people get in touch with you?
So I'm actually currently getting a new website up and running, but currently people can contact me through Facebook or Instagram. Chris Nicolson on Facebook or Crystal Chris on Instagram. There will be a new website up in the coming months, which is going to have all the stuff that I do. But I'm working really hard at the moment on putting that book together. That's my main focus, alongside my regular work. So if anybody's looking for some shamanic work, some soul release, cord cutting, any house clearances and cleanses, anybody wants anything like that, I'm willing to take a few of them on. I'll obviously speak to you afterwards about the person that contacted your missus, but I don't want to do too many of them, so I want to be quite limited with those, because I want to do a lot of more positive stuff. And also I'm doing regular sound baths every month. I'm also looking for more sound bath locations across the country, so if anybody wants a very experienced sound bath practitioner with 20 years of experience to come along and do sound bath for your group, then please get in contact with me. I'll give you, you've got my number that you're more than welcome to give out, and you put my Facebook link and people can contact me on there. Any of the links that you've got on. Feel free to contact, reach out, have a chat. I'm always happy to talk and discuss some interesting subjects. And if people disagree with me as well, more than happy to talk as well. You can't just push one specific belief. You've got to be able to discuss and debate and talk about it. I'll always do it with respect, and that's I ask the same in return, because we all have different views, particularly those who've maybe been a bit it's caused them some stress about mediumistic activities. I know that's a biggie, but I'm willing to talk more and discuss things with people if they want to have a chat.
I think that's very important. We when we discussed on the previous podcast about cognitive dissonance, we all face it. I was listening to a podcast. I mean, we'll stop soon, but I was listening to a podcast earlier on which put question marks on some of my viewpoints over the past few years as well, and I've got very strong views over the past few years. So, but I've got to allow myself to listen to that, and I think it's wise that we all try and listen to all viewpoints, and then find discernment and find your own way through them and make a decision. But like you said earlier on, you may change your mind in time. I know that I have through my life, and I'm open to changing. I think if there's anything that's guaranteed in this reality, this experience is change. So, but you know what, brother, thank you so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed it, as always, chatting to you, and we'll definitely must do another one, and I will see you at VibeFest in September.
Thank you very much, Ant. I've really enjoyed it as well. You've got a great podcast, mate. I hope it goes stronger and stronger. Thanks to everybody who's listened in, and thank you again, mate. Much love, and I'll see you in September.
Much love. Much love.